Hello and welcome to our first ever episode of Refuge in Conversation With. Over the next few weeks, Refuge will be bringing you a series of podcasts for Safer Internet Day. The theme this year is inspiring change, making a difference, managing influence, and navigating change online. In this series, we're discussing some really sensitive topics, including domestic abuse, stalking, and financial hardship. If you're affected by any of our discussions, please know support is available. Contact the National Domestic Abuse Helpline on 0808 2000 247 from a trusted device. Refuge is the largest specialist domestic abuse organisation in the UK. On any given day, our services support thousands of survivors, helping them to overcome the impacts of abuse and rebuild their lives, free from fear. Today's episode is being hosted by myself, Jodie. I'm currently the Service Manager for Refuge's Technology Facilitated Abuse and Economic Empowerment Service. And I'm joined today by Emma Pickering. Emma, welcome.
Thank you, Jodie. I'm Emma Pickering and I oversee the Technology Facilitated Abuse and Economic Empowerment team at Refuge. My job is to develop and deliver the strategy and to support the team, ensure that we are an income generating team and we deliver on our strategic objectives, which is what I will talk to you about today.
So Emma, tell us a little bit about this service. It's fairly new, is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've been around since October 2017 and we were created because Impact, our recording system, where we record all of our casework management information related to our survivors, was showing a theme that technology was being misused to create harm, to track, to stalk, to monitor and survey victim survivors of domestic abuse. So we were funded by Google for a 3-year project, and that was to support survivors directly with complex tech abuse concerns. And from there, we've grown, and we're now a team of 13, and we have various different roles. My role, which oversees the team, and then we've got an economic partnership manager that looks at our economic work, working with financial regulators, ensuring that women can regain financial independence when they've been victim of coerced debt, fraud. And then alongside that, we have a banking lead, we have training leads, we have a home office project as well that supports our buy-in-led charities, making sure that we're raising awareness and sharing expertise as well across the sector, which is really important and part of our strategic objectives. And then we have tech abuse leads as well, dispersed nationally across services and also within our service as well, making sure that what we do remains central to survivors as well. So we're still supporting survivors with complex tech abuse concerns.
So there was this pattern noticed, and from there, this service has been born. And it sounds like the outreach points in lots of different directions, and that's got to be a strategic priority thing. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about the wider priorities for this team?
Yeah, absolutely. So the strategy encompasses 5 strategic priorities, and that is to raise awareness of technology facilitated abuse and economic abuse, be recognised thought leaders within the sector, drive legislative and policy changes to improve responses for survivors, increase agency awareness of both technology facilitated abuse and economic abuse, and lastly, build partnerships to share our expertise and expand our impact. And some of the examples of the ways in which we plan to achieve our outcomes are via reaching more survivors. We do this through our campaigns, our newsletters that we've recently developed. Our tech safety website is key, so expanding on our website content. We've recently expanded and introduced lots of economic content on our tech safety website, so it's really important that we're myth busting some of the information that survivors receive around economic abuse. They understand how to approach creditors and when to accept liability for debts and when to push back, especially if there's been fraud, and how to inform and feel protected around economic abuse. We're hoping to deliver a UK Tech Summit annually to share our trends and findings, and play a proactive role in working groups and coalitions as well to raise awareness of trends that we're seeing in the UK. We will contribute and lead on research and develop and deliver accredited training packages and embed tech leads within Refuge services. So currently we have a number of tech leads embedded within local services at Refuge, and we're hoping to expand that so we can make sure that we're reaching more survivors as well. So that's really key. We also have a National Domestic Abuse Helpline tech lead that supports the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, making sure that all of the survivors that aren't within a Refuge service still receive technology facilitated abuse support, which is really key to us. We don't want it to be a postcode lottery for support, that any survivor, irrelevant of where they're living, can call up the helpline and receive support. And if the case is really complex, they will be referred through to the helpline tech lead and receive dedicated support. We feed into Ofcom's reviews of the Online Safety Act. We make recommendations relating to the Financial Code of Conduct and child maintenance reform. And we collaborate with tech companies as well to ensure that tech is developed through a VORG lens to mitigate the risk of harm to women and girls. Legislative work also encompasses economic abuse, so that's the child maintenance reform and the Banking Commission as well, which we fed into. Alongside the legislative work, we work with our policy team and we make sure that we feed into, when it is appropriate, when there is legislative pieces of work, we fed into the Law Commission around malicious communications and where we'd seen emerging trends around technology facilitated abuse and where there were gaps within the law, and we'd seen trends with survivors reporting to us concerns. And then alongside the legislative work and the raising awareness, we also have building partnerships as well. We want to ensure that we're recognised thought leaders in the sector, especially in the UK. In order to achieve that, we are feeding into research, and that's conducting our own research internally within the service. So we have a number of people who have areas of interest that they're feeding into around women with disabilities, Black and minoritised women in tech. I'm also doing a PhD and looking at the link between domestic homicide reviews and technology facilitated abuse, seeing if agencies are addressing and identifying tech facilitated abuse within their reports. We're also contributing towards research as well, feeding in survivors, trends, themes and voices to make sure that we're referenced as well. And then building partnerships. So it's really important for us that we share our expertise with other agencies, that we don't sit on this information and these findings, that we share that more widely. So part of that is with the buy-and-led partners. So we're sharing information, resources, we're developing bespoke information for them, resources and guides for their survivors and their agency workers. But also wider, we're really keen to make sure that anything that we're identifying, any trends, themes, survivors that are feeding to us, we're sharing that more widely. So that helps ensure that agencies can support survivors. And lastly, that's our kind of strategic aim overall, really, is to ensure that agencies are identifying technology facilitated abuse and agencies are responding appropriately to survivors. And by that we mean police, children's services, agencies that directly support survivors. And a way that we're doing that is developing bespoke training packages and delivering that training packages to those agencies to ensure that they understand the trends, the themes and ways in which technology can be misused to harm survivors. Because some of the times what we see, it seems and it appears that it's not feasible, it's not possible, but what we're identifying in our casework is that there are different ways and mechanisms in which tech is evolving and is being misused to create harm for survivors. So we need to share that with agencies so they don't dismiss victim survivors when they report technology facilitated abuse to them, and they understand the nuances and the ways in which tech can be used to create harm.
So if I am a social worker listening to this, a police officer listening to this, or a member of the public listening to this that maybe is concerned for my relationship or someone that I know for their relationship, we're talking about technology facilitated abuse, often called tech abuse, goes by many different names.
Yep.
At its core, what is tech abuse? How do people develop their understanding of what this is? If this is the first time you've heard that phrase when you're listening to us, how would you define that?
It's defined simply by the fact that technology is the facilitator to create and cause harm, distress, monitor, harass and abuse another person. It's really important that we remember that the technology isn't the thing that's the problem. Sometimes tech can be created and it is harmful, And we do a lot of work with tech developers to ensure that they mitigate the risk by creating products that minimize the risk of harm. We can't always ensure that we can eradicate that, but what we can do is make sure that products land on the market and it minimizes the risk. But behind every tech, every app, every application, every software is a human person or people making a choice to cause harm. And we can't deflect from that or forget that there's a perpetrator, an abuser, that's making a choice to use the technology to create the harm to their victim. And technology is just the facilitator. So, what our job is to ensure that we can make sure that you can still use tech safely. We create guides, visual guides, resources, information, and we inform and help empower survivors to use that technology safely. We don't tell them to come offline, we don't ask them to be isolated, and we try and minimise the ask to victim survivors because we acknowledge that the onus is usually on them to make all of the changes to safeguard themselves. And really, what we want to do is take that really and use it as more of an empowering tool of here's how the technology you here's the settings, here's the features, and here's how you can use it safe.
So we're still talking about domestic abuse, aren't we? Those same impacts. You talked about isolation, and I think people often talk about power and control, how that plays a part in abusive relationships. So when we talk about tech abuse, it's the same behaviours, but technology is the tool, the vehicle for the perpetrator. Earlier on, when you spoke about this team strategy, you referenced economic abuse. I think some people might have some questions about how economic abuse fits into tech abuse. How are they linked? Can you speak to us a little bit on that?
So, the intersect of technology facilitated abuse and economic abuse is the online mechanism in which a perpetrator uses to create debts, loans in a survivor's name. And that can be through shopping accounts, through joint accounts, banking accounts, credit cards can be taken out in a victim and survivor's name without their consent and knowledge. But there's also the other side of that, there's coerced debt, which I don't think people talk about enough, where in order to be able to survive, in order to be able to feed your children, to go to work, to put fuel in the car, to just navigate daily life, sometimes the victim survivor finds themselves in a position where they have to obtain some form of credit, whether that's a credit card, taking out a loan, to be able to compensate for the fact that maybe an abuser has restricted their income, stopped them from going to work, has taken their benefits off them, has taken their money off them if they're at work, and it's made life really difficult. They may be monitoring their spending, so they're having to produce kind of receipts or showing them their bank account so they can show in evidence what they've spent their money on and justification of where their money's been spent. So they may find themselves reducing spending in certain areas, maybe food, money for children. And in order to be able to kind of navigate daily life, pay the electric bill, pay the water bill, etc., they're finding themselves having to obtain credit. So that's what we call coerced debt, that's been a result of domestic abuse, of economic abuse. And then the other side of that is the fraudulent activity as well, where perpetrators will use the personal information that they know about a victim survivor, which is name, date of birth, etc., the personal information that you will know, and then use that information to impersonate them and create loans in their name, shopping accounts. And sometimes it's really nuanced things like just sending food deliveries to their new address, and it's a way to say, I still know where you are, I'm still here, this is a reminder. And also the impact is financial as well, because now it's come out of your account and you can afford to pay that. So there's also that knock-on effect as well. So economic abuse really encompasses all of those things that we've just mentioned there. Alongside that, you also have the online element as well. So that's where technology plays a part. So that's why the economic team sits within my team, because they intersect. So there's an online mechanism that enables perpetrators to be able to harass and abuse a victim. This form of economic abuse fits within technology facilitated abuse.
So this shift to a cashless society or a remote society, how we're applying for our financial products and spending our money online more than ever, this is a shift perpetrators are abusing, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you were outlining the strategy for us earlier, it sounded like the work of the Technology Facilitated Abuse Service is really varied. from supporting women and survivors directly to looking more outwardly at, industry. So, what does a typical day in the service look like?
Well, there is no typical day. And we get asked that all the time, don't we? What's a typical day? And it varies. It really does vary, and it varies from role to role as well. So everyone's role is quite different. But I think in general, it can be anything from working with really complex cases, having to take time away to research new emerging forms of tech, trends. We have to be aware if there is new software that's kind of landing on the market that we need to be concerned about. So we have to constantly be monitoring all the changes. We're also part of numerous working groups, coalitions. So we're attending those meetings, we're feeding in, we're constantly developing and updating our training packages to make sure they reflect the trends that we're seeing. We're working with partnership agencies. We're trying to build and establish partnerships. We're looking for funding opportunities to sustain the team. We are kind of applying for bids as well to expand the team and to make sure that we're still here in 3-5 years' time to meet the demand, because that's really important. We're thinking of ways that we can meet the demand. So that's looking at volunteer programs within the National Domestic Abuse Helpline for the tech lead. So the role is very varied. And then we also have media asks that come in. Then we've got asks from internal colleagues around legislative asks, feeding into a report via Ofcom potentially, working with our partner agencies, meeting them, writing reports, evidence of impact. So, it is incredibly varied, but in a way that makes the job really interesting. And yeah, I think all of us really enjoy that element that, no day is the same. It's always different, and we're all very much kept on our toes here of all of the changes that are constantly happening, which is exhausting, but it's, yeah, I think we all enjoy it as well.
A worthwhile thing to put all that time and effort into. And I must say, surely particularly for survivors, you mentioned right at the start of that the complex sort of casework. And also, right at the start of our conversation today, you spoke about keeping survivors at the centre of the work that's done here. So, I guess as we start to slowly wrap up, what I'd really love to ask is what do you think the biggest issues that survivors are facing is when it comes to technology facilitated or economic abuse? And are there any trends or issues that we feel like are being spoken about right now that maybe are a bit of a hot topic or a buzzword that actually maybe aren't the biggest issue survivors are facing?
I think we know what the biggest topic and issue is this week, as it landed last week with the Taylor Swift AI generated deepfake images that were
Mm-hmm.
circulating. That brought a lot of noise, which is good because what that did was it highlighted an issue that's been around for years actually. Deepfake technology is not a new form of tech facilitated abuse. We've seen this years ago. We were supporting survivors around this issue. But I think what we really need to remind people is, while obviously it's important that the conversation is being had, and I'm happy that people are looking at legislation, policy reform, everyday women and girls are victim to intimate image based abuse, and we need to ensure that the legislation supports them as well, and not just celebrities and people that are in the public eye, because while that's important and will have a very detrimental impact on celebrities and people in the public eye, it also does have a very detrimental impact on everyday women survivors. So we need to ensure that the legislation supports them as well. So I think in terms of what's a hot topic, it will always be anything AI, because it's a new area that people are just starting to get their head around. How does it work? What are the challenges? What are the areas for concern, and how does that impact people? And I think what we're identifying already with AI and software is the fact that it's probably disproportionately impacting women and girls. So there's lots of negative tech that we're seeing land on the market that's AI generated, that's disproportionately impacting women and girls. And that could be in a number of ways. One, for instance, is you can remove imagery from only a woman and girl if you upload images of them, but you can't from a male. So it's just simple things like that, that already it's being generated in a negative context for women and girls. So that's something that we're mindful of. But in terms of the wider picture, what we need to focus on, I would say really is, again, it's that push for raising awareness of as tech evolves and develops, that's more technology that's on the market. One, we need to be really mindful that we're not normalising the monitoring, the tracking, and the insidious nature that technology facilitated abuse can encompass. That we're not normalising monitoring children, tracking and monitoring partners, that there's boundaries in place. And if it feels unsafe, that you've got a safe space that you can report that, and that we're not creating an environment where people are blurring the lines and they're not sure of what is consent and what isn't consent. And I think that it's our job as well to raise awareness and to feed trends in as well to the wider public so people are aware this is happening to me, I'm not comfortable, I know where I can go for support. And that's why we created the Tech Safety website, a dedicated website and resource where people can find guides, resources and information to secure their technology. And I think that's really key for us, is that people feel empowered to make those decisions, to know where to get information and resources. And as our work evolves, a real key theme as well is making sure that they're really accessible. That's for women with disabilities, women whose first language isn't English. It's really key for us to make sure that we're supporting as many survivors as possible, and we're not isolating anyone by creating guides and resources that only fit one type of victim survivor, because then we're not doing our job correctly. We need to make sure that, and that's why we really push for lots of visual guides as well, lots of resources that people can watch and they can visually see where their settings are and how to navigate their resources, their devices, and their applications, so they know how to secure their technology and they feel empowered to do that themselves.
Thank you. It's such a thoughtful response to that, covering not only those hot topic issues, but also the issues we know have been long-standing, like that stalking and that tracking, but also actually identifying that one of the biggest issues survivors will face is accessible resource and safe spaces. Really, really brilliant to hear from you today. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for. Thank you, the listener, for joining us today. Over the next few weeks, we're really pleased to be bringing you a series of In Conversation With, led by our tech leads and joined by some really key professionals in the space. You can look forward to us exploring topics around digital inclusion, financial well-being, accessibility, and much more. However, if you have been affected by any of the issues we've covered in today's session, please do know that you can reach out. Contact us, Refuge, on the National Domestic Abuse Helpline. Again, that's 0808 2000 247 from a device that you think is safe. You can also chat to us Monday to Friday from 3 p.m. all the way up to 10 p.m. And if you need BSL services, we have interpreters available from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday. For information specifically about tech abuse, please visit refugetechsafety.org and join us again for future Refuge in Conversation With.